The old ranchers around Helena, Montana Territory used to say a man could break a horse in 7 days, but understanding the human heart took a lifetime. I never paid much attention to sayings like that until the winter of 1884, when I learned they were right. My name is Ethan Cross. I'm 45 years old now, sitting on the porch of what folks call the largest ranch in Lewis and Clark County. The Double V stretches across 1,400 acres of the best grazing land this side of the Rockies. 800 head of cattle bear my brand. My children, all 6 of them, are scattered across the yard below me. The youngest, James, is chasing his sister Nora around the cottonwood tree where I married their mother 11 years ago. People ask me how I built this empire. They want to know about cattle prices and land deals and the secrets of good water rights. But the real answer starts with a choice I made on a frozen December night when I was 34 years old, broken by grief, and trying to raise 3 children alone. That choice changed everything. It began with a blizzard. December came hard to the valley in 1884, the kind of cold that split fence posts and turned your breath to white ghosts before it left your mouth. I'd been a widower for 2 years by then. My wife Sarah had died of scarlet fever in 3 days flat, leaving me with 3 children who needed a mother and a ranch that needed constant attention. Marcus was 8 years old, serious as a judge, already trying to be the man of the house. Benjamin was 7, always asking questions I didn't have answers for. And Lily, just 5 years old, who still cried for her mama every night. I'd learned to cook after a fashion. Burned more biscuits than I'd like to admit. The house stayed clean enough, though it never had that woman's touch Sarah used to bring to everything. The children wore clothes that were mended but clumsy, my thick fingers struggling with needle and thread by lamplight after they'd gone to bed. The ranch kept me busy, too busy maybe. 800 acres back then, 300 head of cattle, and just me and 2 hired men to manage it all. The work was good for grief, I suppose. Kept my hands occupied, even when my heart felt like a stone in my chest. That December, I had another problem beyond loneliness and fatherhood. Thomas Brennan. Thomas owned the property to the east of mine, about 500 acres of decent grazing land and a cabin on Prickly Pear Creek. We'd been neighbors for 6 years, and for most of that time we'd gotten along well enough, shared tools when needed, helped each other with roundups, the way neighbors should. But Thomas had a demon that rode his shoulder. Whiskey. And when whiskey got hold of him, which was most nights, he became a different man. Mean, suspicious. The kind of drunk who saw insults where there were none and picked fights over fence lines that had been settled years ago. He'd been after me for months about a 50-acre parcel on our shared border. Claimed his deed showed it was his land. I checked my own papers, filed proper with the Territorial Land Office back in 1878, and I knew better. But Thomas wouldn't let it go. Every time he got liquored up at the Silver Star Saloon, he'd come riding over, shouting about claim jumpers and thieves. I tried reasoning with him. Showed him my deed, offered to ride into Helena together and settle it with Judge Watson. But drunk men don't listen to reason. They listen to the bottle. The night of December 15th, I'd taken the children into Helena for supplies. Winter was closing in hard, and I needed to stock up on flour, salt, lamp oil, and ammunition. The sky had that heavy gray look that promised snow, the kind that could dump 3 feet in a night and trap you for a week. Marcus sat beside me on the wagon seat, his young face set in concentration as he watched how I handled the reins. Teaching moments, I called them. Every trip to town was a chance to show my boys how men conducted themselves, how to bargain fair but firm at the mercantile, how to treat women with respect, even the saloon girls who worked the evening shift, how to shake a man's hand and look him in the eye. Benjamin and Lily huddled in the back under blankets, excited about the trip. Town was an adventure when you lived 5 miles out. The lights, the people, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery. We finished our business at Murphy and Neal Mercantile just as the first snowflakes started falling. Big, wet flakes that meant serious accumulation. I loaded the supplies quick and got the children settled. The smart move was to head straight home, but I needed to stop at the land office. I'd been waiting on confirmation of my boundary survey, and I wanted that paper in hand before Thomas made good on his threats to file a claim dispute. The land office was closed. Of course, it was near 6 o'clock, and government men keep regular hours. I stood there on Last Chance Gulch, frustrated, watching snow begin to pile up on the boardwalk. That's when I heard Marcus call out from the wagon. "Pa, there's someone at the old stage station." I looked where he pointed. The Overland Stage Company way station sat at the edge of town, abandoned since the Northern Pacific Railroad pushed through 5 years back. The building sagged under too many winters. The porch tilted. The hitching post leaned like a drunk cowboy. And sitting on those tilted steps was a woman. Even from a distance, I could see she was in trouble. Hunched over, arms wrapped around herself, wearing nothing but a thin cotton dress in weather that was dropping toward 15 below. No coat, no shawl worth mentioning, just sitting there as snow began to cover her shoulders like a burial shroud. I felt something tighten in my chest, part recognition, part alarm. I knew that dress, blue cotton with small flowers. I'd seen Sarah wear one just like it to church. I walked toward the woman slowly, the way you approach a wounded animal that might bolt. The children stayed in the wagon watching. Marcus had already picked up on my tension, his hand moving to the small knife he carried on his belt. Good instinct. The boy was learning. As I got closer, I recognized her. Catherine Morrison. Everyone called her Kate. She was Thomas Brennan's wife. I'd seen her around town a handful of times over the past 3 years. A pretty woman, or had been. Dark hair, blue eyes, the kind of face that should have smiled easy. But I'd noticed the shadows under those eyes growing darker each year. The way she flinched when Thomas spoke sharp. The hollow look that came from loneliness and fear. I'd heard the rumors, of course. Small town, big gossip. Kate had a problem with the bottle. Started drinking a year or two into her marriage. Some said it was grief over not being able to have children. Others said it was Thomas himself who drove her to it, leaving her alone night after night while he gambled and whored his way through his inheritance. I suspected both were true. Now she sat on those steps, shaking from cold, a cloth bag clutched in her lap. Her lips had gone blue. Her fingers were white. She was maybe an hour from freezing to death, and she didn't seem to care. I stopped about 10 feet away, spoke quiet like you do to spooked horses. "Ma'am, you planning to sleep out here, or did life just drop you where it pleased?" She looked up. Her eyes were distant, unfocused. Shock, maybe, or resignation. "I'm waiting for a ride," she said. Her voice was thin, shaky, like ice cracking under too much weight. I glanced at the empty road, then up at the sky where snow fell thick and heavy. In this weather, the only ride coming is the one you don't want. She didn't respond, just stared at nothing. I studied her face for a long moment, saw something there beneath the cold and the fear. A flicker of the woman she'd been before Thomas and whiskey had ground her down. Saw my Sarah in her too, maybe. The way Sarah had looked at the end, when the fever took her beyond reach, and all I could do was hold her hand and pray. The choice came down to something simple. I could walk away, take my children home, let Helena deal with its own problems. Or I could offer help to someone who clearly needed it. My Sarah would have wanted me to help. She'd been that kind of woman, the kind who brought food to families when someone died, who sat with sick children so their mothers could sleep, who believed that doing right mattered more than convenience. I made my decision. Come with me. 3 words. Simple as breathing. But they hit the air with weight, like I just made a promise I'd have to keep no matter the cost. She looked up at me, and I saw something change in her eyes. Not hope, exactly. More like a drowning person who spots a rope. "You don't know me," she whispered. "You don't know what I am." A ghost of a smile tugged at my mouth, though the situation wasn't funny. "Ma'am, I see a woman about to freeze to death. Whatever else you are, we can discuss it by a fire." I tilted my head toward the wagon where 3 small faces peeked out from under the canvas cover. If I meant harm, I wouldn't bring my children along. So take my help before the snow finishes what your husband started. Her breath caught. She stared at me, trying to figure out how I knew about Thomas. But I didn't explain. Didn't need to. Small towns are like that. Everyone's business is everyone's business, whether you want it or not. I shrugged out of my heavy wool coat and stepped forward. She didn't move away. I draped it around her shoulders, and the weight of it settled over her like a blessing. The coat smelled of wood smoke and sage and horse sweat, honest smells, working man smells. My hands brushed her arms as I adjusted the collar, and even through my gloves, I could feel how cold she was. dangerous cold. The kind that shuts your body down piece by piece until there's nothing left but a frozen corpse in a pretty blue dress. From the wagon, Lily's small voice called out, "Papa, she's shaking." "Yes," I said quietly, my gaze still fixed on Kate Morrison. On Catherine Brennan, I suppose, though I didn't think of her that way. That's exactly why she's coming with us. I tried to help her stand, but her knees buckled. Months of poor eating and rough treatment had left her weak. I caught her around the waist, pulled her upright against my chest. For one heartbeat, the world narrowed to just that contact. The weight of another person in my arms for the first time in 2 years. The way her body shook with cold and fear and something deeper. "Easy now," I murmured. "Hold on to me. You're safe." I'd made that promise without thinking. But standing there in the falling snow with a half-frozen woman in my arms and 3 children watching from the wagon, I realized I meant it. She was safe. I'd make damn sure of it. I lifted her onto the wagon seat beside me, easy as lifting a sack of flour. She weighed nothing. That should have worried me more than it did. The children stared with open curiosity. Benjamin whispered to Marcus behind his hand. Lily just smiled, shy but sweet, already drawn to the woman who'd appeared out of the storm like something from a fairy tale. "Hush," I said to the boys, though my tone carried no anger. "Miss Kate is coming home with us. She needed help, and that's what we do. We help." Marcus frowned. "Is she coming home with us forever?" "We'll figure that out tomorrow. Tonight she needs warmth and food and safety. That's enough for now." I clicked my tongue and the bay mare started forward. The wagon creaked behind us, loaded with supplies and children and one more soul who needed shelter from the storm. Kate pulled my coat tighter around herself. Her shaking was violent now, her body fighting hypothermia with everything it had left. I kept one hand on the reins and put the other arm around her shoulders, lending what warmth I could. It wasn't proper, maybe. A man and a married woman pressed close on a wagon seat. But propriety could freeze to death for all I cared. This was about survival. The ride home took 40 minutes through snow that fell heavier with each passing mile. I knew these roads blind, could have driven them in pitch darkness. The mare knew them too, sure-footed even as snow piled up on the frozen ground. Kate didn't speak, just leaned against me, taking warmth, breathing in short, ragged gasps. I could smell whiskey on her, faint but unmistakable. The bottle had its hooks in her deep. I'd seen it before in men who'd lost everything that mattered. Seen them drink themselves to death slowly, one bottle at a time, because dying slow was easier than facing whatever demon rode their backs. But Kate wasn't dead yet, and as long as she was breathing, she had a chance. The double vibe appeared out of the storm like a beacon. Lamplight glowed in the windows of the main house. The barn loomed dark and solid against the swirling white. Home, safety, everything I'd built over 16 years of hard work and careful planning. I helped Kate down from the wagon and guided her toward the house with one hand on her elbow. The boys jumped down and started unloading supplies without being told. Good boys. They knew the routine. Get the perishables inside first, then stable the horses, then stack the rest in the mudroom. Inside, warmth wrapped around us like a physical thing. I'd banked the fire before leaving, and it had kept the house warm enough. I settled Kate into the rocking chair near the hearth and wrapped a thick woolen blanket around her shoulders on top of my coat. She looked small in that chair, fragile, like a bird with broken wings. "Marcus, Benjamin," I said, "get washed up. Lily, help your brothers. I'll have supper ready soon." The children disappeared down the hall, their footsteps quick and light on the wooden floor. I knelt in front of Kate and looked up at her. Her eyes were closed, but tears leaked from beneath her lids. Not sobbing, just silent tears that spoke of deeper pain than cold. "Name's Ethan Cross," I said quietly. "This is the Double V Ranch. You are welcome to stay as long as you need." Her eyes opened. "I don't have money to pay you." "Did I ask for money?" "No, but then eat, rest, get warm. We'll sort out the details tomorrow." I stood and walked to the stove where a pot of venison stew had been simmering since morning. I'd learned to keep a pot going in winter. Easy meal for hungry children and tired men. I ladled a generous portion into a tin bowl and brought it back with a spoon. "Eat slow," I advised. Your stomach's been empty too long. Don't shock it. She took the bowl with shaking hands and stared down at it. Steam rose from chunks of venison, carrots, and potatoes swimming in rich brown gravy. The smell alone was probably enough to make her dizzy. She took a bite, then another. Then she was eating faster, hunger overtaking caution. I let her finish the whole bowl before taking it away. She needed the calories more than she needed my lecture about going slow. When the bowl was empty, I sat across from her and leaned forward, elbows on my knees. Time for truth. I'd brought her into my home, into my children's lives. I needed to know what I was dealing with. Who hurt you, ma'am? Her hands twisted in her lap. The truth sat heavy on her tongue, bitter and shameful. But she was tough enough to say it. My husband, Thomas Brennan, he threw me out tonight, said I was barren, said the doctor told him my drinking ruined my womb and I wasn't worth keeping. My jaw tightened. Anger rose hot and fast in my chest, but I kept my voice calm. Getting angry wouldn't help her. She'd had enough of men's anger. And the drinking? She closed her eyes. Started 2 years ago. Thomas was gone most nights. Whiskey, other women. I was alone in that cabin days after day with nothing but silence. One glass turned into two, two turned into something I couldn't stop. Her voice cracked. The doctor said it weakened my body. Thomas decided I was useless. I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I spoke, and I made sure she heard every word. The doctor's a fool, and your husband's worse. Her eyes flew open, surprised. I stood and moved to the fireplace, bracing one hand against the mantel. Stared into the flames while I found the right words. My wife died 2 years ago. Fever took her in 3 days. I've been raising 3 children alone ever since. I paused. Let me tell you something about women and worth. A woman is not just a womb. Any man who thinks otherwise doesn't deserve a wife. He deserves a broodmare. The words came out harder than I intended, but they were true. I'd seen too much of life to believe that a woman's only value was in bearing children. Sarah had been my partner, my friend, the person who made me better than I was alone. That's what marriage should be. Not ownership, not obligation. Partnership. I turned to face Kate. You'll stay here. Sleep in the room off the kitchen. It's small, but it's warm. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest. She shook her head. I can't just... You can, I interrupted, and you will. Because if you walk back out into that snow tonight, you'll die, and I don't have the patience to bury another woman before Christmas. My bluntness should have offended her. Instead, something in her chest loosened, just a little. I saw it in her eyes, the smallest spark of hope. Thank you, she whispered. I nodded once, then called for the children to come say goodnight. They filed in, scrubbed and ready for bed. Lily stared at Kate with open curiosity. The boys were more guarded, protective of their territory and their father. Normal, I supposed. This is Miss Kate, I told them. She'll be staying with us for a while. I expect you to treat her with respect and help her feel welcome. Understood? 3 nods. 3 sets of eyes watching me to see if I meant it. I did. After they'd said their goodnights and gone to bed, I showed Kate to the small room off the kitchen. It had been Sarah's sewing room once. Now it held a narrow bed, a small table, and not much else. But the quilt was clean, and the room stayed warm from the kitchen stove. There's water in the pitcher, I said. Chamber pot under the bed. If you need anything during the night, my room is down the hall. Don't hesitate to knock. She nodded, standing in the doorway with my coat still wrapped around her shoulders. She looked lost, like a ghost in her own life. I started to turn away, then stopped. Kate, you're safe here. I give you my word on that. Whatever else happens, whatever we have to deal with tomorrow, tonight you're safe. That's not nothing. It's everything, she whispered. I left her alone and went to check on the children. Found them all in their beds, but not sleeping. Marcus sat up when I entered. Pa, is Miss Kate gonna be okay? I sat on the edge of his bed. I don't know, son. She's been through something hard, but we're going to help her. That's what men do. We protect people who need protecting. Even if it makes Mr. Brennan mad? Smart boy. He'd already figured out the politics of what I'd done. Especially then, I said, Doing what's right isn't always easy. Sometimes it costs you something. But a man who only does the right thing when it's convenient isn't much of a man at all. Marcus thought about that for a moment, then nodded. Yes, sir. I tucked him in, then checked on Benjamin and Lily. Both were already asleep, exhausted from the excitement of the day. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching them breathe, my children, my responsibility. Everything I did had to be measured against their welfare. Bringing Kate into this house was a risk. Thomas would come looking for her. There would be talk in town, judgments, maybe even legal trouble. But when I weighed all that against the image of a woman freezing to death on a stage station porch, the choice was clear. Sarah would have approved. Hell, Sarah would have insisted. I went to my own room but didn't sleep. Lay in bed listening to the wind howl outside, the snow pile up against the windows, thinking about the woman in the room off the kitchen, wondering what demon she was fighting, wondering if I'd just invited trouble into my home or if I'd done the only decent thing a man could do. Around midnight, I heard it. Soft at first, then louder. The sound of someone crying, not sobbing. Worse, the kind of crying that comes from deep inside, from a place where pain lives and breathes and never stops. I got up, pulled on my pants and shirt, and walked to Kate's room, stood outside the door for a moment, listening. The crying had turned to something else. Moaning, gasping. The sounds of a body in distress. I knocked soft. Kate, can I come in? No answer except more moaning. I opened the door and stepped inside. She was on the bed, curled into a ball, shaking violently. Sweat soaked her nightgown despite the cold. Her hands clutched at the blanket like she was trying to hold on to reality itself. Withdrawal? I'd seen it before in men who'd spent too many years with the bottle. The body screaming for what it had learned to need. The shakes, the sweats, the feeling that death would be easier than another minute of this agony. I sat on the edge of the bed without asking permission. Put one hand on her shoulder, firm but gentle. Kate, look at me. She turned her head. Her eyes were wild, unfocused, pupils dilated, breath coming too fast. You're not dying, I said firmly. Listen to me. You're not dying. Your body's angry because you took away something it wanted, but it'll settle down, I promise. How do you know? The words came out choked, desperate. Because I've seen men come back from worse, and because I'm not letting you go through this alone. I stayed with her for the next hour, held her hand when the shaking got too bad, talked about nothing and everything. The ranch, the weather, my children, the price of cattle at the Helena stockyards, anything to give her something to focus on besides the storm in her body. My voice was low and steady, an anchor in her chaos. I'd done this before, years ago, when one of my hired men tried to quit whiskey cold. Sat with him 3 nights running until the worst passed. He'd made it, stayed sober for 2 years before a horse kicked him in the head and killed him instant. But those 2 years had been good years. He told me that once, near the end. Said he was grateful for the chance to die sober and clear-headed instead of drowning in a bottle. I hoped Kate would get that chance. Eventually, the shaking eased. Her breathing slowed. She was still sick, still suffering, but calmer, exhausted, wrung out like a washcloth. Thank you, she whispered. I squeezed her hand once and stood. Get some sleep. Tomorrow will be easier. I meant it. Each day would be a little easier than the last. Not easy, but easier. That was how recovery worked. One hard day at a time, until the hard days started getting softer around the edges. I went back to my room but didn't sleep much. Lay awake thinking about the woman in my house and the man who'd thrown her away. Thinking about my own wife, gone 2 years, and the hole she'd left that nothing seemed to fill. Thinking about choices and consequences and the weight of responsibility. By morning, I'd made a decision. Kate could stay as long as she needed. I'd deal with Thomas when he came, and he would come. Men like him always did. They threw things away and then got angry when someone else picked them up. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, I'd kept a woman from freezing to death. I'd given shelter to someone who needed it. I'd done what Sarah would have wanted me to do. That was enough. For now, that was enough. The first week was hell. Not for me. I'd been through hard times before. Watched my wife die slowly while I stood helpless. Buried her in ground, so frozen we had to use pickaxes to break through. Raised 3 children alone through Montana winters that killed cattle and broke men's spirits. I knew hard. But watching Kate fight her way back from the edge of the bottle was a different kind of hard. The kind that tested patience and resolve and made you question whether mercy was always kind. The second night was worse than the first. She woke screaming around 2 in the morning, a sound that brought all 3 children running to my room in their nightclothes. I found her on the floor of her room, curled up tight, vomiting into the chamber pot, while her whole body shook like she'd been struck by lightning. Go back to bed, I told the children firmly. Miss Kate is sick, but she'll be fine. I'll take care of her. Marcus hesitated in the doorway. Pa, should I get Dr. Morrison? I shook my head. No doctor can help with this. It's something she has to fight through herself. Now go on. They went, though I could hear them whispering in the hall. Scared, probably. I couldn't blame them. It was frightening to see an adult so completely undone. I knelt beside Kate and held her hair back while she retched. When the worst passed, I cleaned her up with a damp cloth and got her back into bed. Her nightgown was soaked through with sweat. I brought her one of Sarah's old ones from the trunk in my room, turned my back while she changed, then settled her under fresh blankets. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry you have to see this. Nothing to apologize for. You're fighting a war. Wars are ugly. I pulled the rocking chair close to her bed and sat down. I'm going to stay here tonight. You need someone nearby in case it gets bad again. You don't have to. I know, but I'm going to anyway. So I stayed, dozed in the chair while she tossed and turned, woke when she cried out or started shaking, brought her water when her mouth got too dry, talked to her when the demons got too loud in her head. Around 4 in the morning during one of her lucid moments, she asked me why. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. I thought about that for a long moment, watched the lamplight flicker across the ceiling, listened to the wind rattle the windows. Because a man who can save someone and doesn't, that's not a man. That's a coward. I looked at her. And because I know what it's like to be alone with something too heavy to carry by yourself. She was quiet after that, but I could see her turning my words over in her mind, testing them for truth. By the third day, she could keep food down. Not much. Broth mostly and some dry toast. But it was progress. The shaking came in waves now instead of being constant. She could stand without falling, could make it to the outhouse and back without help. The children were starting to adjust to her presence. Lily especially. The little girl was starved for female attention, and Kate seemed to understand that instinctively. Even sick, even fighting her own battles, Kate would smile at Lily when the child peeked into her room, would let Lily show her the collection of smooth river stones or the rag doll I'd carved from pine. Marcus and Benjamin were more cautious. Boys often are. They'd lost their mother and weren't eager to risk caring about another woman who might disappear. I understood that, tried to give them space while also making it clear Kate was under my protection. On the 4th day, Thomas came. I'd been expecting him. Surprised it took him this long, honestly. He must have been on a particularly bad bender to wait 4 days before coming to collect what he considered his property. I was in the barn repairing tack when I heard the horse. Knew it was him before I looked. Thomas rode a roan mare with a distinctive gait, 3 beats instead of 4. Some old injury that never healed right. I set down the leather strap I'd been working on and walked out to meet him. Better to keep him away from the house, away from Kate and the children. Thomas Brennan sat astride his horse, red-faced even in the cold. He was 35, but looked older. Drinking aged a man faster than hard work ever did. His eyes were bloodshot, his clothes rumpled. He smelled like whiskey in unwashed body even from 10 feet away. Heard you got my wife, Cross? I kept my voice level. I've got a woman who was freezing to death. Didn't notice anyone claiming ownership at the time. His face darkened. Don't play games with me. That's my wife. She belongs in my house. Your wife is a person, Thomas, not livestock. And she's too sick to move. Sick from what? The bottle? He sneered. Yeah, that's what she does. Drinks herself stupid, then expects everyone else to clean up her mess. I felt my jaw clench. Took a breath, let it out slow. You threw her out in a blizzard, 15 below zero. She would have died. Maybe that would have solved both our problems. The words hung in the cold air between us. I stared at him, trying to find some trace of the man I'd called neighbor for 6 years. The man who'd helped me rebuild my fence after a windstorm, who'd shared coffee and conversation on easier days. That man was gone, if he'd ever really existed. Get off my property, Thomas. Not without my wife. She's not going anywhere, not today, maybe not ever, depending on what she decides when she's well enough to make that choice. He leaned forward in his saddle. You got no right to keep her. I'll get the sheriff. Go ahead, I said calmly. Tell Sheriff Morrison you threw your wife out to freeze to death. Tell Judge Watson you left her to die because you were too drunk to care. See how that works out for you in court. We stared at each other. His hand moved toward his hip, where I knew he kept a pistol. Mine stayed relaxed at my side, but I was ready. I'd fought in worse situations than this. Most men who threatened violence were all bluster, but I wouldn't bet my life on most men. After a long moment, Thomas spat into the snow. This ain't over, Cross. No, I agreed. I expect it's not. He wheeled his horse around and rode off, the roan's hoofbeats muffled by fresh snow. I watched until he disappeared, then went back inside. Kate was standing in the kitchen doorway. She'd heard everything. He'll make trouble for you, she said quietly. Let him try. Ethan, I should go. I don't want to bring this down on you and your children. I walked past her to the stove, poured myself coffee from the pot that was always warm, took a sip, let the heat settle in my chest. Kate, I'm going to say this once, and I want you to hear it clear. You're not the problem. Thomas is the problem, and I've dealt with worse problems than a drunk bully who thinks women are property. I turned to face her. You stay as long as you need. I'll handle Thomas. She looked like she wanted to argue, but something in my face must have convinced her I meant every word. She nodded and went back to her room. I meant what I said. But I also knew Thomas wouldn't let this go easy. Men like him never did. So the next morning, while Kate rested and the children did their chores, I saddled my horse and rode into Helena. The ride took an hour through snow that was starting to pack down into usable road. The sky was that brilliant blue you only get in Montana winter, so clear and cold it hurt to breathe. The kind of day that made you feel alive just by surviving it. Helena was busy for a Tuesday, miners coming down from the gulch to spend their earnings. Ranchers buying supplies. Women shopping for Christmas, which was coming up fast. The town had that frontier energy, that sense of possibility and danger mixed together in equal measure. I tied my horse outside the courthouse and went looking for Judge Watson. Found him in his chambers, reviewing papers and looking generally irritated by the interruption. Herbert Watson was 60 years old, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, and fair-minded. We'd done business before. He'd settled a water rights dispute between me and another rancher 3 years back. Ruled in my favor because I had the better documentation. Ethan Cross, he said, looking up from his papers. What brings you to town on a cold Tuesday? Legal matter, Your Honor. Need some advice. He gestured to a chair. Sit. Talk. So I did. Told him the whole story, finding Kate at the stage station, bringing her home, Thomas's visit, the threats that were sure to come. Watson listened without interrupting, his fingers steepled under his chin. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Thomas Brennan is a drunk and a fool, he said finally. But he's still legally married to Catherine Morrison. That gives him certain rights under territorial law. Even if he tried to kill her? Did he, actively, or did he just throw her out and let nature take its course? I saw where this was going. The law is going to split hairs about intent. The law always splits hairs, Ethan. That's what makes it law instead of mob justice. He leaned back in his chair. But there are options. She could file for divorce, abandonment, and cruelty. With proper testimony, I'd grant it. How long would that take? 3 months minimum. Probably longer with Thomas fighting it, which he will. I thought about that. 3 months. Spring would be here by then. Cattle season starting up. And Thomas would have 3 months to make trouble. What if I want to move faster? Watson's eyebrows rose. Faster how? What if she stayed at my place, legal-like, not as a guest, as hired help? Housekeeper, maybe. Would that protect her from Thomas claiming she abandoned the marriage? He considered. It might, if you kept proper propriety, separate living quarters, no hint of impropriety, and you'd need to pay her. Make it a legitimate employment situation. I can do that. But Ethan, Watson leaned forward, his expression serious. The moment Thomas files a complaint, and he will, this becomes public record. People will talk. Some will assume the worst no matter how careful you are. Can you live with that? Can your children? I thought about Marcus and Benjamin and Lily. Thought about the kind of man I wanted them to see me be. The kind of man who did right even when it cost something. I can live with it. Watson nodded slowly. All right, I'll draw up a temporary separation order. 90 days. Kate Morrison stays on your property as hired help. Thomas Brennan stays away. During that time, she can file for divorce if she chooses. If he violates the order, he goes to jail. Simple as that. What's this going to cost me? $5 filing fee, and your word that you'll conduct yourself properly. I won't have my orders used to facilitate adultery. You have my word. We shook on it. Watson drew up the papers right there, his pen scratching across the legal forms with practiced ease. I signed where he indicated, paid the $5, and tucked the document into my coat. One more thing, Watson said as I stood to leave. That boundary dispute Thomas has been muttering about. The 50 acres on your eastern border. What about it? I'd get my deed filed proper with the land office. Make sure everything's documented clear. Men like Thomas, when they get desperate, they get creative with the truth. I'll do that. Thanks, Herbert. I rode home feeling like I'd accomplished something. Kate had 90 days of legal protection. Time to heal. Time to decide what she wanted her life to look like. And I had legal standing to keep Thomas away. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. When I got back to the ranch, I found Kate in the kitchen. She was standing at the counter, hands in bread dough, kneading with careful, methodical movements. The sight stopped me in the doorway. She looked better. Still thin, still pale, but more present, more alive. Her hair was pulled back in a simple braid. She wore one of Sarah's old dresses, blue calico that fit well enough, and she was making bread. You're up, I said. She glanced at me, almost shy. I needed to do something. Lying in bed was making me crazy. You know how to make bread? My mother taught me, before we moved to Montana. She pressed her palms into the dough, folded it, pressed again. I used to be good at this. Before, she didn't finish. Didn't need to. I knew what before meant. I walked to the table and set down my hat. I went to see Judge Watson. Got you some legal protection. 90 days where Thomas can't touch you. Can't even come on this property without risking jail time. Her hand stilled in the dough. You did what? Got you time. Time to heal. Time to figure out what you want. I paused. But there's a condition. You have to be officially employed here, as housekeeper. I'll pay you $10 a month. That makes it legitimate in the eyes of the law. She turned to face me fully. Ethan, I can't take your money. Why not? You're working, aren't you? Making bread, taking care of the house, that's labor. Labor gets paid. But, no buts. This is business, Kate. Clean business. Nothing improper about it. I held her gaze. Unless you'd rather go back to Thomas. No. The word came out fast and firm. No, I can't go back there. Then this is the way forward, 90 days. We see how it goes. If you want to file for divorce, Judge Watson will help. If you want something else, we'll figure that out too. But right now, today, you're safe and you're legal and Thomas can't do a damn thing about it. She stared at me for a long moment. Then tears started rolling down her face. Not sad tears, something else. Relief maybe, or gratitude, or just the release of fear she'd been carrying so long it had become part of her. Why, she whispered. Why are you doing this for me? I thought about all the reasons. Because it was right. Because Sarah would have wanted it. Because I'd seen too much suffering in this world to add to it when I had the means to help. But what I said was simpler. Because you deserve better than what you got, and because I can. She nodded, wiped her eyes with the back of her flour-dusted hand, and went back to kneading bread. We didn't talk about it again that day, but something had shifted. The house felt different, fuller somehow, like a space that had been empty too long was finally starting to fill back up. The children noticed too. That evening, after I put them to bed, Marcus asked me if Miss Kate was going to stay forever. Don't know about forever, I told him, but she'll be here for a while. That okay with you? He thought about it seriously, the way he thought about everything. She seems nice, and Lily really likes her. What about you? Do you like her? I guess. She's not Mama. No, I agreed. She's not. And she's not trying to be. But that doesn't mean she can't be good for us in her own way. Marcus nodded, satisfied with that answer. I kissed his forehead and left him to sleep. The next week passed in a rhythm that felt almost normal. Kate grew stronger each day. The shaking stopped. Her color came back. She could eat real meals now, not just broth. And she worked. Lord, did she work. Up before dawn making breakfast, cleaning, mending clothes, teaching Lily how to do ribbon curls in her hair, something the girl had been begging for since Sarah died. Making meals that tasted like something other than survival. The house came alive under her attention. Little things I hadn't noticed were wrong suddenly got fixed. Curtains got washed. Floors got scrubbed. The kitchen started smelling like cinnamon and fresh bread instead of just coffee and bacon grease. And she was careful. So careful. Never touched me unnecessarily. Always kept proper distance. Made sure the children were never alone with her in a way that might seem improper. She understood what was at stake. But there were moments, small moments when our hands would brush reaching for the same coffee pot, when our eyes would meet across the dinner table and hold just a beat too long, when I'd catch myself watching her work and feeling something I hadn't felt in 2 years. Want. Not just physical, though that was there too, but something deeper. The want for companionship, for partnership, for someone who understood the weight of living and didn't run from it. It scared me, feeling that. Made me question whether I was being a good man or just a lonely one looking for someone to fill the hole Sarah left. I tried to push it down, focus on work. The ranch needed constant attention. Fences to repair, cattle to check on. The winter had been harsh, and I'd already lost 3 calves to cold. Every loss was money gone, food stolen from my children's mouths. Then came the night in the barn. It was late January, nearly 6 weeks since I'd found Kate at the stage station. A massive storm was rolling in, the kind that could bury the valley in snow for a week. I'd sent Marcus and Benjamin out to help secure the outbuildings while I checked the northwest barn where we stored most of our hay. Kate appeared in the doorway wrapped in my spare coat. I'm coming with you. No need, I'll be quick. You shouldn't be out there alone. What if something happens? I wanted to argue, tell her to stay inside where it was warm and safe. But the truth was, she was right. Going out alone in a blizzard was how people died, and there was something in her face, a determination I hadn't seen before, that told me arguing would be useless. All right, but stay close. We fought our way to the northwest barn through wind that tried to tear us apart. Snow came at us horizontal, stinging exposed skin like thrown sand. I grabbed her hand and pulled her close. We made it to the barn and ducked inside. The wind howled through gaps in the walls, but it was quieter than outside. I lit a lantern and carried it to the far end where the main doors hung crooked on their hinges. One good gust and they'd blow open, scattering hay across 3 counties. Kate held the lantern while I worked, hammering nails, tightening ropes, practical work that required focus. The barn smelled of hay and leather and animal musk. Shadows danced across the wooden beams. Our breath misted in the cold air. I was nearly finished when the lantern slipped in her cold hands. I reached up to steady it. Our fingers touched. The moment stretched. Kate looked down at me. I looked up at her. The space between us hummed with something electric and dangerous. Ethan, she said quietly. My name sounded different in her mouth, like a prayer or a question. I set down the hammer and climbed off the beam. Stood in front of her close enough to see snowflakes caught in her hair. Close enough to see her chest rise and fall with each breath. I've been trying to stay away from you, I said, my voice rough. Trying to do the right thing. But I can't stop thinking about you. Her breath caught. I don't want you to stay away. I closed my eyes briefly, gathering my resolve. When I opened them, I knew she could see the hunger there. The want I'd been fighting for weeks. If I touch you now, I said slowly, I won't be able to stop. She set the lantern on a barrel, stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat of her body. Then don't stop. I groaned and pulled her into my arms. My mouth found hers with desperate hunger. She kissed me back just as fiercely, her hands fisting in my shirt, pulling me closer. I backed her against the barn wall, my body pressing into hers, and she gasped at the heat that flared between us. My hands roamed over her waist, her hips, her back. Every touch was electric. Every breath was fire. When my mouth moved from her lips to her neck, she let out a soft moan that nearly undid me. "Tell me you want this," I murmured against her skin. "I want this," she whispered. "I want you." For one heartbeat, I held absolutely still. Then I drew back, breathing hard, and rested my forehead against hers. "Not like this," I said, though it cost me everything to say it. "Not hiding in a barn like we're doing something shameful." I smoothed a hand over her hair, cupped her cheek. My thumb traced along her jaw. "You deserve better than that. When I take you to my bed, it won't be rushed. And it won't be something we pretend didn't happen. It'll be real, honest, the way it should be." She let out a shaky laugh that was half sob. "What happens now?" "Now we figure it out together, one step at a time." I pulled her into my arms again, holding her close. Her heartbeat thundered against my chest, matching my own. We stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's warmth while the storm raged outside. Eventually, we had to go back. The children would worry, the house needed tending. Real life waited beyond the barn doors. But something had changed between us, something fundamental. We both knew it. The question was what we were going to do about it. The answer came 2 weeks later when Thomas made his move. We'd settled into an uneasy peace. Kate continued working as housekeeper. I paid her every week, $10 in silver coins. I made sure she saw me count out. Proper, legal, above reproach. The town was talking, of course, small towns always did. But most of the talk was sympathetic. The women especially. They'd seen Thomas drunk too many times, heard the rumors of how he treated Kate. They knew she was better off at the Double V, even if propriety said otherwise. But Thomas wasn't done, and on February 10th he made his play. It started with the cattle. 50 head went missing from my eastern pasture, the one that bordered Thomas's land. I found the fence cut clean, like someone had taken wire cutters to it in the night. The tracks led east onto Thomas's property. I rode over there with Marcus, both of us armed, found Thomas in his yard looking smug despite the hangover that clearly had him in its grip. "Lost some cattle, Cross?" "You know I did. They're on your land." "Are they? Funny. I thought maybe they were my cattle. Hard to tell when they're all mixed together." I felt rage rise hot and fast, but I kept my voice level. "Thomas, I've got 90 head with my brand. You've got maybe 40 with yours. I can count. So can a judge. Judge might be interested to know you've been harboring my wife, keeping her from her lawful husband. That's a crime, isn't it? Enticement, I think they call it." So that was his game. Hold my cattle hostage unless I gave Kate back. "Your wife has legal protection from Judge Watson. She's not going anywhere." We'll see what a jury says about that. I've got a lawyer from Butte coming in. Says I got a good case. Alienation of affection, enticement, could cost you $500 and your reputation. He smiled. "Might even lose those kids of yours when they find out what kind of man you really are." The threat hit home. He saw it in my face. "Give me back my wife, Cross. Do it today and I'll forget about the lawsuit. Hell, I'll even give you back your cattle. We go back to being neighbors like before." I stared at him for a long moment. Thought about $500 I didn't have. Thought about losing my children because some judge decided I was morally unfit. Thought about everything I'd built over 16 years crumbling because I'd tried to do the right thing. Then I thought about Kate, the way she'd looked sitting on those steps, ready to freeze to death. The way she'd fought her way back from the bottle. The way she smiled at Lily when she thought no one was watching. I made my choice. "Go to hell, Thomas." His face darkened. "You'll regret this." "Maybe, but I'll regret it honest." I rode back to my ranch and went straight to the house. Found Kate in the kitchen preparing dinner. She looked up when I came in, saw my face, and set down the knife she'd been using. What happened? I told her. All of it. The stolen cattle, the threats, the lawsuit Thomas was planning, the possibility that I might lose everything because I'd chosen to help her. She went pale. Ethan, I'll go. I'll go right now. I won't let you lose your children because of me. No, but no, Yang. I stepped closer. Kate, I'm going to say this once. I made a choice 6 weeks ago when I brought you home. That choice wasn't conditional. It wasn't something I get to take back when it becomes inconvenient. I took her hands in mine. Thomas can sue me. He can steal my cattle. He can run his mouth all over Helena. I don't care. You're not going back to him. Not today, not ever, unless that's what you want. It's not what I want. Then that's settled. I pause. But I need to know something. These 90 days are almost up. The separation order expires in 2 weeks. After that, Thomas can legally demand you come home, unless you file for divorce. She stared at me. Are you asking me to divorce him? I'm asking what you want your life to look like. Because whatever you choose, I'll support it. But if you choose to stay, if you choose to be free of Thomas permanently, then yes, divorce is the path. And I'll stand with you through every minute of it. What if I lose? You won't. Not with Judge Watson presiding. Not with the evidence we have. Thomas threw you out in a blizzard. He's a known drunk. He beats you. Any judge with half a brain will grant the divorce. And then what? Her voice was small. What happens to me after? I can't stay here forever as your housekeeper. People will talk. I took a breath. This was the moment. The question I'd been circling for weeks without quite having the courage to ask. Then don't stay as my housekeeper. Stay as my wife. The words hung in the air between us. Her eyes went wide. Ethan, I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other 2 months. But I'm not a man who wastes time once he's decided something. I squeezed her hands. I want you here. Not as a guest, not as hired help. As my wife, as a mother to my children. As my partner. I can't give you children. The doctor said, I don't care what the doctor said. I already have 3 children. What I don't have is someone to share my life with. Someone to stand beside me when things get hard. Someone to love. I paused, made sure she was really hearing me. I'm asking you to be that person, Kate. Not because I need a mother for my children, but because I need you. Because in 6 weeks, you become something I didn't think I'd ever have again. Hope, future, a reason to believe life can be good and not just something to survive. Tears rolled down her face. Yes, 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 I'll marry you. I pulled her into my arms and held her so tight she could barely breathe. Relief and joy and fear all mixed together in my chest. I just proposed to a married woman. We'd have to fight Thomas in court. The town would talk. There would be scandal and judgment and trouble. But none of that mattered, because Kate had said yes. We told the children that night after dinner. Lily shrieked with joy and threw herself at Kate, wrapping small arms around her waist. Benjamin grinned. Marcus looked thoughtful, then nodded his approval. Does this mean Miss Kate is staying forever? Lily asked. Yes, sweetheart, forever. That word felt good in my mouth. Forever. I hadn't thought I'd get another forever after Sarah died. But here it was, unexpected and hard-won, and more precious because of the fight it took to get here. The next morning, Kate and I rode into Helena together, filed her divorce petition with Judge Watson, listed the grounds: abandonment, cruelty, failure to provide. Watson read through the document carefully, then looked at Kate. Mrs. Brennan, are you certain this is what you want? Divorce is serious business. Once started, it's hard to stop. I'm certain, Your Honor. And you understand Mr. Brennan will contest this? Yes, sir. Watson nodded. All right, then. Court date is set for March 20th. That gives both parties time to prepare. Mr. Cross, I assume you'll be testifying? Yes, Your Honor. Good. We'll need strong testimony to overcome a husband's rights, even a husband like Thomas Brennan. The 6 weeks crawled by like winter molasses. Thomas hired himself a lawyer from Butte, a sharp-featured man named Caldwell, who'd built a reputation defending the indefensible. Word around Helena was he'd never lost a matrimonial case. Like to paint wives as Jezebels and husbands as victims of female treachery. I didn't much care for lawyers, but I trusted Judge Watson. He'd seen enough of life to know the difference between legal maneuvering and simple truth. March 20th arrived cold and clear, the kind of day where sound carried for miles and your breath hung in the air like smoke. Kate dressed in her Sunday best, the dark blue dress we'd bought special for the occasion. Her hands shook as she tried to button the collar. I stepped behind her and did it myself, my fingers steadier than hers. "You don't have to be brave today," I told her quietly. "You just have to tell the truth." "What if the truth isn't enough?" "It will be. I promise you that." The courtroom was packed. Seemed like half of Helena had turned out to watch the spectacle. Thomas Brennan's wife divorcing him in public. The scandalous housekeeper situation at the Cross Ranch. It was better entertainment than anything the traveling theater shows could offer. Judge Watson entered from his chambers, black robes swishing, face carved from granite. He'd been a judge for 20 years, seen every kind of human meanness and occasional grace. He took his seat behind the bench and surveyed the crowded room with the expression of a man who'd rather be anywhere else. "This court is now in session. The matter before us is Brennan versus Brennan, petition for divorce. Mr. Caldwell, you may present your opening statement." Thomas's lawyer stood. He was a small man, barely 5.5 feet, but he had the aggressive energy of a rooster spoiling for a fight. Wire-rimmed spectacles perched on a sharp nose. Voice like a preacher calling down hellfire. "Your Honor, this is a simple case. A wife's sacred duty is to her husband. Catherine Brennan abandoned that duty. She left her lawful husband's home and took up residence with another man. A man, I might add, who has clear designs on her affections. This is not a case of cruelty or abandonment. This is a case of adultery and enticement, and the law is clear on such matters." He went on for another 5 minutes, painting Kate as a scheming adulteress and me as a homewrecker who'd stolen another man's property. Every word was calculated to inflame prejudice and ignore facts. When he finally sat down, I could feel Kate trembling beside me. Judge Watson looked at me. "Mr. Cross, you're representing Mrs. Brennan?" "I am, Your Honor." "Then present your case." I stood. Public speaking had never come natural to me. I was more comfortable with cattle and horses than crowds of people. But I'd prepared for this. Spent 3 weeks going over testimony with Kate, making sure we had our facts straight. "Your Honor, the facts are simple. Catherine Brennan was thrown out of her home by her husband on December 15th of last year. The temperature was 15 below zero. She had no coat, no money, no shelter. She would have frozen to death within hours if I hadn't found her and offered help. That's not abandonment on her part. That's attempted murder on his." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Watson banged his gavel once. "I called Dr. Morrison to the stand." The doctor came forward, a solid man in his 50s with the careful manner of someone who'd seen too much suffering. He took the oath and sat. "Dr. Morrison, did you examine Catherine Brennan in December of last year?" "I did. December 16th, the morning after Mr. Cross brought her to his ranch." "What was her condition?" "Severe hypothermia, early stages of frostbite on her fingers and toes, malnourished, signs of alcohol withdrawal. If she'd been outside another hour, maybe 2, she'd have died." "And did she tell you how she came to be in that condition?" "She did. Said her husband threw her out the night before, told her she was worthless and barren and he didn't want her anymore." Caldwell jumped up. "Objection! Hearsay, Your Honor." Watson looked at him over his spectacles. "Overruled. The doctor can testify to what his patient told him." "Continue, Dr. Morrison." "That's about it. I treated her for exposure and advised Mr. Cross to keep her warm and fed. Told him the withdrawal would be rough, but she'd likely survive it." "One more thing, doctor. You told Thomas Brennan that his wife's drinking had damaged her reproductive system, correct?" Morrison shifted uncomfortably. "I did tell him that, and I was wrong." "Wrong how?" "Mrs. Brennan recently gave birth to a healthy daughter. Clearly, her body was more resilient than I'd given it credit for. The inability to conceive during her marriage to Thomas Brennan likely had multiple causes. Stress, for one. Living with an abusive alcoholic takes a toll on the body in ways we don't fully understand." "Thank you, doctor." Caldwell tried to shake Morrison's testimony on cross-examination, but the doctor held firm. He'd made a mistake in his diagnosis. He was man enough to admit it. Next, I called Sheriff Morrison. No relation to the doctor, though they shared a last name. The sheriff was a weathered man in his 60s, gray mustache, eyes that missed nothing. Sheriff, how long have you known Thomas Brennan? 6, 7 years, since he moved to the territory. In that time, how many complaints have you received about him? Dozen, maybe more. Public drunkenness mostly. Few bar fights. One domestic disturbance call in the summer of '83. Tell the court about that domestic call. Got a report from a neighbor. Heard screaming from the Brennan place. I rode out there, found Mrs. Brennan with a split lip and a black eye. She wouldn't say how it happened, but Thomas was drunk as a skunk and belligerent. I warned him if I got called out there again, he'd spend a night in jail. Did you ever have to go back? No, but that doesn't mean nothing happened, just means nobody called. Caldwell objected 3 times during the sheriff's testimony, trying to get it thrown out. Watson overruled him every time. The man was clearly enjoying watching the Butte lawyer squirm. Then it was Kate's turn. She walked to the witness stand like she was walking to the gallows, face pale but determined. She took the oath in a voice so quiet Watson had to ask her to speak up. I kept my questions simple. Let her tell the story in her own words. Mrs. Brennan, how long were you married to Thomas Brennan? 3 years. We married in the spring of 1881. Describe the first year of your marriage. It was tolerable. Thomas drank some, but not bad. We had a small place on Prickly Pear Creek. I kept house, he worked the ranch. It wasn't happy, but it wasn't terrible either. When did things change? Second year. Thomas started drinking more, gambling. He'd be gone for days at the Silver Star Saloon. When he came home, he was angry, blamed me for not giving him children, said I was worthless. Her voice caught, but she pushed through. I started drinking to cope with being alone. It was stupid, I know that, but I didn't know what else to do. Did your husband ever strike you? Yes, 3 times that I can remember clearly. Maybe more when I was too drunk to remember. Tell the court about December 15th. Kate took a breath. Dr. Morrison had told Tommen that my drinking damaged my womb, that I'd never have children. Thomas got drunk that night, angrier than I'd ever seen him. He said I was barren livestock and he didn't keep barren livestock on his property. He threw me out, told me to freeze and solve both our problems. What did you do? I walked to town, didn't know where else to go. I sat down at the old stage station and I was ready to die, I think. Seemed easier than fighting anymore. Then Mr. Cross found me. And he brought you to his ranch? Yes, he saved my life, gave me shelter, helped me stop drinking. Never once touched me inappropriately or made me feel unsafe. He showed me I was worth more than what Thomas said I was. The courtroom was dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the wooden floor. Caldwell stood for cross-examination. He circled Kate like a shark scenting blood. Mrs. Brennan, you admit you're an alcoholic? I was. I haven't had a drink in 3 months. But you were drunk frequently during your marriage? Yes. And you admit you failed in your wifely duties? If you mean bearing children, yes. If you mean keeping house and being faithful, no, I did those things. Yet here you sit asking this court to dissolve a sacred marriage because your husband finally lost patience with your drinking? Kate's eyes flashed. He threw me out to die. That's not losing patience. That's attempted murder. Or perhaps it was a desperate man at the end of his rope with a wife who'd become nothing but a burden? Objection! I was on my feet. Counsel is testifying. Sustained, Watson said. Mr. Caldwell, ask questions or sit down. Caldwell tried for another 10 minutes to rattle Kate, but she held steady. She'd lived through hell. A lawyer's tricks weren't going to break her. Finally, both sides rested. Watson sat back in his chair and was silent for a long moment. The courtroom held its breath. I've heard enough, he said finally. The evidence is clear. Thomas Brennan willfully endangered his wife's life by forcing her from their home in deadly weather. That constitutes cruelty under territorial law. The petition for divorce is granted. Mr. Brennan will pay court costs of $15. Mrs. Brennan, you are free. The gavel came down with a crack like thunder. Kate's hand found mine under the table and squeezed so hard I thought bones might break. I squeezed back just as hard. We stood. The crowd parted as we walked down the center aisle toward the door. Some faces were sympathetic, others disapproving. I didn't care about either. We'd won. Outside the courthouse, Kate stopped on the steps. The sun was bright, the air cold and clean. She turned to me with tears streaming down her face. "I'm free." "Yes," I said, "you are. And in 1 month, I'll be your wife." "Yes, you will." She threw her arms around my neck right there in front of Bob and half of Helena. I held her tight and didn't give a damn who saw. We had 1 month until the wedding. 1 month for the town gossips to exhaust themselves. 1 month for Kate to fully believe her old life was dead and buried. But we'd won the hardest fight. The rest would be easy by comparison. Thomas didn't wait for the court date to make his move. 3 days after Kate filed for divorce, trouble came in the form of 5 men riding onto my property just after sunset. I was in the barn checking on a mare about to foal when I heard the horses. Too many horses, moving too fast. I grabbed my Winchester from where it hung on the wall and stepped out into the yard. The riders were silhouetted against the dying light, spread out in a line like they'd done this before. Professional troublemakers, the kind you could hire in any mining town for the right price. The man in the center was older, maybe 45, with a scar running down his left cheek. He did the talking. "You Ethan Cross?" "I am. You're on private property." "Got business with you. Name's Pike. We're here on behalf of Thomas Brennan. He wants his wife back." I levered around into the Winchester's chamber. The metallic click was loud in the quiet evening. "Thomas knows where the courthouse is. He can make his case there. Right now, you need to turn around and ride out." Pike smiled. It wasn't friendly. "See, that's the thing. Mr. Brennan doesn't feel like waiting for some judge to tell him what's his. So we're here to collect what belongs to him. You can hand her over peaceful, or we can do this the hard way." Behind me, I heard the front door of the house open. Marcus stepped out with the Remington shotgun, a double barrel I taught him to shoot last summer. The boy was only 8, but he knew how to handle a weapon, and more importantly, he knew when to. "That's my son," I said calmly. "He's got 2 barrels loaded with buckshot. Behind him in that house are 2 more children and a woman who's under my protection. You really want to start something here?" Pike's smile faded. He hadn't expected armed resistance. Most bullies don't. "Your call, Cross. But Mr. Brennan's serious about this. You don't give her up, things are going to get ugly." "Then I guess they're going to get ugly, because she's not going anywhere." We stared at each other for a long moment. 5 against 2 if you counted Marcus. Bad odds. But I had the advantage of position and motivation. A man defending his home and children will fight harder than any hired gun. Pike seemed to calculate that. Finally, he nodded. "Your funeral." They rode off, but I knew we hadn't seen the last of them. I sent Marcus to bring Kate and the other children down to the root cellar. It was the safest place on the property, built into the ground with thick walls and only one entrance. If shooting started, that's where they needed to be. Kate protested. "I should stay with you. This is my fault." "This is Thomas's fault. And right now, the best way you can help is by keeping the children safe. Can you do that?" She saw the logic and nodded. Gathered Benjamin and Lily and followed Marcus to the cellar. I watched them go, then turned my attention to preparing for what came next. I wasn't a violent man by nature. Never had been, but I'd fought in the Indian Wars before settling in Montana. Knew how to defend ground when I had to. And I knew men like Pike. They'd be back. Probably tonight. Probably with fire. Fire was the weapon of choice for men who wanted to cause maximum damage without much risk. Burn the barn. Burn the outbuildings. Maybe burn the house if they could get close enough. Drive me out or kill me trying. I spent the next hour preparing, filled every bucket I owned with water, positioned them around the barn and near the house, moved the mare and her unborn foal to the far pasture where they'd be out of danger, loaded every gun I owned and placed them at strategic points. Then I waited. They came at 10 o'clock. I saw the torches first, 5 points of light moving across the dark prairie toward my ranch. They weren't trying to hide, why would they? 5 armed men against one rancher. They figured they had overwhelming force. What they didn't count on was that I'd been thinking about this moment since the day I brought Kate home. I'd spent 16 years building this ranch. I wasn't about to let Thomas Brennan and his hired thugs burn it down without a fight. I let them get close, within 50 yards of the barn. Then I fired a warning shot over their heads. The Winchester's crack split the night air. "That's far enough," I shouted. "Next one goes through flesh." Pike's voice came back. "You can't hold us off forever, Cross. We got all night. And I've got 200 rounds of ammunition in the high ground. You want to test which runs out first?" There was a pause, quiet consultation among the riders. Then Pike again. "Last chance, give us the woman and we ride out. Nobody has to die tonight. The only people dying tonight are anyone stupid enough to light those torches." I saw movement. One of the riders pulling back his arm to throw. I didn't hesitate, squeezed the trigger and put a round through his shoulder. The torch fell from his hand into the snow where it hissed and died. The man screamed, his horse spooked and bolted. The other riders scattered, shouting. "Next one kills," I called out. "I'm done with warnings." Gunfire erupted from the darkness. Muzzle flashes lit up the night. Bullets whined past my head and thunked into the barn wall behind me. I dropped low and returned fire. Careful shots aimed at the flashes. The Winchester was a fine weapon, accurate to 300 yards in good light. In the dark with moving targets, I was aiming more by instinct than sight. But I knew my property, knew every dip and rise, knew where the cover was and where there wasn't any. They didn't have that advantage. I heard a horse scream. A man cursed. More gunfire, but less coordinated now. They were losing their nerve. Then I heard something that made my blood run cold. Hoofbeats coming from the direction of town. More riders. Thomas had brought reinforcements. I was calculating whether I could hold off 10 men when I heard a familiar voice boom across the prairie. "This is Sheriff Morrison. Drop your weapons and stand down." Relief flooded through me. Someone must have heard the shooting and ridden for help. God bless small-town neighbors. The sheriff arrived with 6 deputies, all armed with rifles. The firelight from the dropped torches showed Pike and his men scattered across the snowy ground, caught between my position and the law. "Pike," Morrison shouted, "I know you. I know every man riding with you. Drop those guns or I'll have you all in chains before midnight." There was a long moment of tense silence. Then one by one, weapons hit the ground. Morrison and his deputies moved in, rounding up the would-be attackers. I came down from my position in the barn, Winchester still at the ready. My hands were shaking now that the danger had passed. Adrenaline wearing off, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Morrison walked over, his weathered face grim. "You all right, Ethan?" "I am. Thanks for the timing." "Don't thank me. Thank Kate Morrison. She's the one who rode to the Hendersons' place and had them fetch me." I stared at him. "Kate did what?" "Rode out the back way while you were preparing up here. Broke 3 ribs when her horse stumbled, but she kept going. Got to the Hendersons and sent them for playing. That woman's got more grit than most men I know." My chest tightened. She'd been hurt, riding for help while injured, while I told her to stay safe in the cellar. "Where is she now?" "Monica Morrison's with her at the house. She'll be fine, but she needs rest." I found Kate lying on the sofa in the front room, her torso wrapped in bandages. Dr. Morrison was packing up his medical bag. He looked up when I entered. "Cracked ribs, possibly 3 of them. She'll be in pain for a few weeks, but nothing's broken through the skin. She's lucky." Kate's eyes were closed, her face pale with pain, but when I knelt beside her, she opened them. "You're a damn fool," I said softly. "Takes one to know one." Her voice was weak but steady. "You could have been killed." "So could you. So I went for help." She reached for my hand. "We're partners, Ethan. You said so yourself. Partners don't let each other fight alone." I lifted her hand to my lips and kissed her knuckles. "You saved us. You saved the ranch. You saved everything." "Good." A small smile. "Because I have a wedding to attend." Dr. Morrison cleared his throat. "Speaking of which, Sheriff Morrison arrested Thomas Brennan about an hour ago. Found him hiding in the woods half a mile from here. He's the one who hired Pike and those others. When they all go before the judge, Thomas is looking at 10 years minimum. Conspiracy to commit arson. Attempted murder. Judge Watson doesn't take kindly to that sort of thing. I looked at Kate, saw tears sliding down her temples. It's over? It's over. Over, Morrison confirmed. Thomas won't bother you again. Not from inside a territorial prison. After the doctor left, I carried Kate to her room and settled her carefully on the bed. She was asleep before I pulled the blanket over her. I stood there watching her breathe. This woman who'd ridden through pain to save my life, who'd fought her demons and won, who'd chosen me when she could have chosen safety. The wedding was supposed to happen in 2 weeks. That was before the attack, before Kate's injury. I figured we'd have to postpone, give her time to heal. But Kate had other ideas. We're getting married on schedule, she announced 4 days later. She was sitting up now, moving carefully but stubborn as ever. You can barely walk without wincing. Then you'll build me a chair. But we're getting married April 22nd like we planned. I've waited long enough to start my life. I'm not waiting anymore. So I built her a chair. Marcus helped. We spent 2 full days in the workshop, cutting and sanding and fitting pieces together. Made it with a high back and padded arms, sturdy enough to support her weight, but comfortable enough that she could sit through the ceremony without agony. When we finished, Marcus stepped back and looked at our work. Think it's good enough? I think it's perfect. You did good work, son. Proud of the man he was becoming. The wedding took place under the cottonwood tree on a clear April afternoon. 50 people showed up, double what I'd expected. Seemed the whole town wanted to witness this. Some out of support, some out of curiosity. I didn't care which. They were all welcome. Kate sat in the chair Marcus and I built, wearing a cream-colored dress she'd sewn herself from fabric I'd bought in Helena. Lily had woven wildflowers into her hair. She looked beautiful. Not in the delicate way some women were beautiful, but in a stronger way, weathered by hardship and refined by fire. Reverend Chapman conducted the ceremony. He was a good man, practical and kind, who understood that faith and life were messy, complicated things that didn't always fit in neat theological boxes. When it came time for vows, I knelt beside Kate's chair so we were eye to eye, took her hands in mine. Kate, I said, and my voice carried across the assembled crowd. I promise to stand beside you. Not in front, not behind, but beside. I promise to protect what we build together. I promise our children, mine and yours and ours, will know what a real partnership looks like. I promise when I'm old and gray, I'll still choose you every single day. She was crying by the time I finished. Happy tears, the kind that heal instead of hurt. Her turn. Ethan, you saved my life. But more than that, you taught me I was worth saving. I promise to be the partner you deserve. I promise to stand with you through drought and flood, through loss and triumph. I promise to love your children as my own. And I promise that every morning when I wake up in this life we've built, I'll thank God for that blizzard that brought me to you. Reverend Chapman smiled. By the power vested in me by Montana Territory, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. I did, long and deep and not caring who was watching. When we pulled apart, the crowd was cheering. Lily was jumping up and down. Marcus and Benjamin were grinning like fools. We were a family, official, legal, real. The reception was simple but joyful. People had brought food, fried chicken and cornbread and pies of every variety. Someone produced a fiddle and music filled the air. I danced with Kate, carefully mindful of her ribs, danced with Lily, who stood on my feet, even got Benjamin and Marcus out for a turn, teaching them the steps they'd need to know when they were courting age. As the sun began to set, I pulled Kate aside, led her back to the cottonwood tree, where lanterns hung from the branches, casting warm light across the grass. Happy? I asked. She looked up at me, and I saw everything I needed to know in her eyes. More than I ever thought possible. I kissed her gently. Good, because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way. And I meant it. The months after the wedding passed in a blur of work and joy and settling into our new life. Kate healed slowly, the ribs knitting back together over weeks that stretched into months. By summer, she was back to full strength, running the household with efficiency that amazed me. She was good at it. Not just the cooking and cleaning, though she excelled at those, but the managing. She turned our household into a smooth operation, organized the pantry, established routines for the children, created systems that made everything run better. And she was good with Marcus, Benjamin, and Lily. Not trying to replace Sarah, but carving out her own space in their lives. Teaching Lily to sew, reading to Benjamin every night, working alongside Marcus in the garden, teaching him about plants and growing things. The children thrived under her attention. I watched them bloom like flowers after rain, watched Lily become more confident, watched Benjamin's curiosity expand, watched Marcus grow into the kind of young man who would make any father proud. The ranch prospered too. With Kate managing the household, I had more time to focus on the business. I bought another 200 acres to the south, invested in better breeding stock, started implementing some of the new ranching techniques I'd read about in agricultural journals. By fall, we had 450 head of cattle, up from 300. The price per head had climbed to $8, up from 6. I sold 150 head that October and cleared $1,200, more money than I'd seen in any single year. We used some of it to hire 2 more ranch hands, used some to buy equipment, saved some for the children's future, and used some to expand the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a proper parlor. Life was good, better than good. For the first time since Sarah died, I felt like I was living instead of just surviving. Then in November, Kate gave me news that changed everything. She waited until after dinner, after the children had gone to bed. We were sitting by the fire, her sewing in her lap, me reviewing ledgers. Normal evening routine. But I could tell something was on her mind. She kept glancing at me, then looking away. Finally, I set down the ledger. "What is it?" She put down her sewing, took a breath. "I think I'm with child." The words didn't register at first. I just stared at her. "What?" "I'm pregnant, Ethan. About 2 months along, Dr. Morrison confirmed it this afternoon. But the doctor said you couldn't, that the drinking had ruined your chances." I know what he said, but apparently he was wrong. She looked scared and hopeful and uncertain all at once. "Are you happy? Is this okay?" I crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into my arms. Held her so tight I probably squeezed the air from her lungs. "Happy? Kate, this is a miracle." "I'm scared," she whispered into my chest. "What if something goes wrong? What if I lose it? What if the doctor was right and my body can't carry a child?" I pulled back enough to look at her face. "Then we'll deal with it. Together. But right now, today, you're pregnant. We're going to have a baby, and that's cause for celebration, not fear." We told the children the next morning. Lily screamed with delight and hugged Kate around the middle. Benjamin looked curious and slightly confused about the biology of it all. Marcus just grinned and said he hoped it was a boy so he'd have someone to teach ranching to. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Kate suffered terrible morning sickness for the first 4 months. There were days she could barely keep food down. But she was tough, pushed through it, and I was there for every moment, holding her hair back when she was sick, bringing her dry toast and ginger tea, rubbing her back when the nausea was overwhelming. By spring, the sickness had passed and Kate was glowing. Her belly grew round and prominent. The children were fascinated, constantly wanting to feel the baby kick. Even Marcus, who tried to act too grown up for such things, would sneak a hand onto Kate's belly when he thought no one was watching. The ranch continued to thrive. Cattle prices climbed to $10 a head. I sold 200 head in March and cleared $2,000. Used it to buy another 300 acres and upgrade our equipment. The Double Vive was becoming one of the largest operations in the territory. But all the money and land in the world didn't matter as much as what was happening in our home. Kate was building a life inside her body. We were creating the future, one kick at a time. On July 25th, 1886, Kate went into labor. It happened fast. 1 minute she was hanging laundry. The next she was doubled over. The water breaking and pouring down her legs. I got her inside and sent Marcus racing to Helena to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Owens. But babies keep their own schedule. Mrs. Owens was dealing with another birth clear across the valley. By the time Marcus got to town and tracked her down, it was clear she wouldn't make it in time, which meant I was delivering this baby myself. I'd help Sarah with our 3 children. Knew the basics, but knowing and doing are different things when it's your wife screaming in pain and your child trying to enter the world. I set up the bedroom, cleaned sheets, hot water, towels, sent the other children to stay with the Hendersons. Then I sat with Kate and held her hand while her body did the ancient work of bringing forth life. Labor lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of watching her suffer and being helpless to do anything but encourage and support. 6 hours of checking her progress and praying I wasn't missing something critical. 6 hours of hoping with everything I had that both mother and child would survive this. And then, near midnight, a baby's cry split the air, strong and healthy and furious at being born. I caught her, this tiny, wet, screaming thing, and my hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped her. A girl. We had a daughter. I cleaned her quickly, the way I'd been taught. Cut the umbilical cord with my knife that I'd boiled clean. Wrapped her in a soft blanket. Then I placed her in Kate's arms. Kate was exhausted, soaked with sweat, pale as death. But when she looked down at our daughter, her face transformed. Pure joy, pure love, pure wonder. "She's perfect," Kate whispered. "She's perfect, Ethan." I knelt beside the bed looking at them both. My wife, my daughter, my family. Everything I'd ever wanted and things I hadn't even known to want. "What should we name her?" Kate asked. I thought about it. Thought about my mother who died when I was young. Thought about legacy and family and the weight of names. "Nora, after my mother, if that's all right with you." Nora Cross. Kate tested the name. Smiled. "It's perfect." Mrs. Owens arrived 2 hours later, apologetic and flustered. But by then the work was done. She examined Kate and Nora, pronounced them both healthy, and told me I'd done a fine job for a rancher playing midwife. The children came home the next day and met their new sister. Lily was entranced, wanting to hold Nora constantly. Benjamin was more cautious, unsure about this tiny creature that made so much noise. Marcus just stood back and watched with a small smile, the proud big brother. Life with a baby was chaos. Sleepless nights, constant feeding, diapers that needed changing. The house smelled of milk and baby and exhaustion. But it was good chaos, the kind that meant life was happening all around us. Kate took to motherhood like she'd been born for it. Despite the doctor's dire predictions, despite years of believing she'd never have children, here she was, nursing our daughter, singing lullabies, being everything a mother should be, and watching her with Nora, watching the way she glowed with happiness, I realized something. This was what healing looked like, not just getting past the bottle or escaping Thomas, but this, building a life, creating joy, becoming the person you were always meant to be. 2 years passed. Nora grew from infant to toddler, walking at 10 months, talking by 15 months, running by 18. She was bright and curious and fearless, climbing everything she could reach and giving me gray hairs with her antics. Then in 1888, Kate got pregnant again. This time we knew what to expect. The morning sickness came right on schedule, but Kate sailed through it better than before. Her body knew what to do now, and I'd learned how to help, what worked and what didn't. Our son was born in March of '89, an easier birth than Nora's. Mrs. Owens made it this time, and the whole thing was over in 4 hours. We named him James after Kate's father who died before we met. 5 children now. Marcus was 12, Benjamin was 11, Lily was 9, Nora was 2, and James was brand new. Our house was full to bursting with life and noise and love. The ranch kept growing. By 1890, we had 1,100 acres and 600 head of cattle. I'd hired a foreman, Jack Thompson, to manage the day-to-day operations. Brought on 5 more ranch hands, built a second barn, and expanded the corrals. Kate opened a small tailoring shop in Helena. Nothing big, just a place where she could take commissions for sewing and mending. It gave her something of her own, separate from the ranch and the children. She was good at it, and the business grew. Before long, she was making $15 to $20 a month, money she saved for the children's education. We were prosperous, not rich but comfortable. More than comfortable. We had everything we needed and most of what we wanted, land and cattle, children, each other. But the thing I treasured most wasn't the money or the land, it was the moments. The everyday moments that made up a life. Sitting on the porch with Kate in the evenings, watching the sun set over land we'd built together. Teaching James to ride while Nora cheered from the fence. Listening to Marcus talk about the girl he was courting in town. Watching Lily read to Benjamin, even though he was older and could read fine himself. These moments, these small, ordinary, precious moments. This was what mattered. One evening in July of 1895, 11 years after I'd found Kate freezing at that stage station, I sat on the porch and looked out over everything we'd built. Marcus was 20 now, practically running the ranch himself. Benjamin was 18, talking about going to university in the fall. Lily was 15 and beautiful, with her mother's eyes and her own fierce intelligence. Nora and James, 9 and 7, were chasing each other around the cottonwood tree, shrieking with laughter. Kate was pregnant again, 6 months along with our third child together. At 41, she glowed with health and happiness. I was 45. My hair was going gray at the temples. My body ached in the mornings from years of hard work. But I'd never felt more alive. Kate came out and sat beside me, her hand finding mine automatically. We didn't need to talk. After 11 years together, we had learned the language of comfortable silence. But after a while, she broke it. "Do you ever regret it, saving me that night?" I turned to look at her, really look at her. This woman who had come to me, broken and desperate and convinced she was worthless. This woman who'd fought her demons and won, who'd built a life from ashes, who'd given me more than I'd ever thought to ask for. "Kate, people ask me how I built the Double Vibe into the biggest ranch in the county. They want to know about business strategy and cattle breeding and land management. But you want to know the real secret?" She nodded. "The secret is knowing when to take a risk on something that matters." That night in the blizzard, I took a risk. Brought home a woman I barely knew. Put my children and my reputation and my whole life on the line. And in return, I got everything. A partner, a friend, a mother for my children. A woman who makes me better than I am alone. I squeezed her hand. "So no, I don't regret it. Not for a single second. My only regret is that I didn't find you sooner." She leaned her head on my shoulder. We sat like that while the sun went down and the children played and the life we'd built hummed around us. This was legacy. Not the land or the cattle or the money. Those things would pass. But this family we'd created, these children we were raising, the love we'd chosen every single day for 11 years, that would last. That would echo forward through generations. Marcus would inherit the ranch someday, would marry and have children of his own, would teach them what I'd taught him, that strength is about protecting the weak and doing right even when it costs you something. Benjamin would go to university, become something other than a rancher. But he'd carry with him the lessons of home, the value of hard work, the importance of family, the knowledge that education and intelligence should serve others, not just yourself. Lily would make her own path, fierce and independent, would choose a man who saw her as an equal, not property, would raise daughters who knew their worth. Nora and James would grow up in a house filled with love, never knowing the hunger and fear their mother had survived. Would take for granted the security and safety that Kate and I had fought so hard to build. And Sarah, our youngest, would be born into a family that chose each other every day. Would know from birth that love was action, not just feeling. That family was built, not born. Would know from birth that love was action, not just feeling. That family was built, not born. This was what we created from that choice I'd made in a blizzard 11 years ago. This legacy of love and work and choosing right over easy. Later that evening, we gathered for dinner. All 8 of us now. Little Sarah, our youngest, had been born in October, 3 months old and sleeping peacefully in the cradle near the hearth. Kate had named her after my first wife, a gesture that brought tears to my eyes when she'd suggested it. It felt right, a bridge between the woman I'd lost and the woman I'd found. I looked around the table at these faces I loved more than my own life. Looked at Kate, glowing in the lamplight, one hand resting on her swollen belly. "Before we eat," I said, "I want to share something." They all looked at me, waiting. People are always asking me how we built this ranch, how we became prosperous, how we made it work. And I tell them it's about cattle and land and water rights. But that's not the real answer. I looked at each child in turn. The real answer is simpler. We built this by doing one thing over and over every single day for 11 years. We chose each other. When it was hard, we chose each other. When it was scary, we chose each other. When the whole world said it was wrong, we chose each other anyway. I reached for Kate's hand. That's the secret to everything good in life. Not money, not luck, choice, choosing to do right, choosing to help when you can, choosing love over fear, choosing to build instead of tear down. Marcus nodded slowly. Benjamin was listening with that intense focus he brought to everything. Lily had tears in her eyes. Nora and James didn't fully understand, but they would someday. So that's what I want you to remember, I finished. When you're grown and gone and building your own lives, remember that everything good comes from choice, and choose well. We said grace and ate dinner, talked about normal things, plans for tomorrow, broken fences that needed mending, the foal that was due any day, the simple, ordinary business of living. But underneath it all was something deeper, something that bound us together stronger than blood or law. The knowledge that we'd been broken and made ourselves whole, that we'd faced darkness and chosen light, that we'd built something worth keeping, worth protecting, worth passing on. After dinner, after the children had gone to bed, Kate and I stood on the porch one last time. The night was clear and cool, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me that night at the stage station. For seeing past what I was to what I could be." I pulled her close, careful of her belly. "Thank you for letting me. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for choosing this life. For choosing me." We stood there wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by everything we'd built. The house, the barns, the land, the cattle, the children sleeping safe in their beds. They called me the cattle baron of Lewis and Clark County, said I was shrewd and lucky and blessed. Maybe that was true. But the only title that mattered to me was the one Kate had given me 11 years ago when she'd said yes to my proposal. Husband, father, partner, friend, that was legacy enough. That night, lying in bed with Kate curled against my side, her hand in mine, I thought back to that December evening in 1884. Thought about the choice I'd faced. Walk away or help. Save myself trouble or save a life. I'd made my choice. And that choice had led to this moment. This life. This joy. If I could go back and do it all again, knowing everything that would come, the fights and the fear and the hard times, I wouldn't change a thing. Not 1 second. Because this was what mattered. This love, this family, this life we'd chosen together. The old ranchers were right after all. A man could break a horse in 7 days. But understanding the human heart took a lifetime. I'd spent 11 years learning Kate's heart, learning my own, learning what it meant to love and be loved in return. And I planned to spend the rest of my days continuing that education. Because some lessons are worth a lifetime of study, and some choices echo through eternity.